This is the Politics of Everything, and I'm your host, Amber Daines. Welcome to the podcast where we want to discuss the politics of everything, from money to motherhood, nutrition to narcissism, startups to secularism, the environment to equality, and much more. Our guests are experts in their field or topic of choice, even if you've not yet heard their name. This is a bipartisan podcast, so while we love exploring varied views and get a buzz from a healthy debate, by no means is this a one-sided forum for any one political view. So please listen up and enjoy the politics of everything. Transformation is a term we all embrace at some stage of our lives. From relationships to our bodies, perhaps our careers or even our spiritual beliefs, they're all part of what we can transform throughout our life. But what if you need a bit of a boost? Meet Kylee Fitzpatrick, who's an expert in transformation and uses the power of storytelling to impact performance. In fact, I've actually heard her be called Australia's Oprah. She's an entrepreneur, influencer, and compassion activist. She's the founding partner and coach at the Performance Code and founder of Team Women Australia. Kylie is also the mother of 3 children. With over 25 years in the spotlight, Kylie is known for her expertise in marketing to women and developing content that effectively engages women on issues that are the very most important things to them. Welcome, Kylie.
Hi, thanks.
So let's start at the beginning. As a kid, what did you dream of becoming when you grew up and why?
Wow, an aerobics instructor, actually.
Leg warmers and all?
Oh, yes, actually, that was the era. My mother was an aerobics instructor, and I remember going to the local community. Well, she was a part-time instructor, so on the weekends she'd be at the local community hall, and I would go obviously with her. And to me, she just looked like she had so much fun. And at the same time, she was having a real positive impact on improving, women's lives.
Oh, that's fantastic. So did you ever do some training in that area, or did you sort of divulge into a different career as you got older?
I did, actually. I always had a passion for sport, so I'm very, all through school I was always involved in, everything to do with sport. But oddly enough, I kind of had this midlife crisis in my corporate career many years later. And when that happened, I actually went and studied to become a personal trainer. So I was fully qualified as a personal trainer for some time.
How funny. And that corporate career, what was that and what did that teach you?
I started out and pretty much spent my career in media marketing. My the early part of my career, I was specialising in the area of research and using the research to inform kind of business leaders. And the thing that I discovered in doing that job was actually how powerful data can be to impact people's performance. Specifically, my job was to analyse data and interpret the data and basically tell a story with the data in using it for editors who would then translate that into stories to impact the growth of the readership of the paper. And we would also give those to sales teams, and they would use it in their sales presentations to impact the revenue performance of the paper.
So it's quite a forensic approach to storytelling, which probably leads into maybe why you're still interested in storytelling, and we'll get to that in a moment. But on today's word and topic, which is transformation, and it's a really big concept, but I know professionally you do call yourself a transformation and storytelling expert, and you specialise in breakthrough performance. So for you, what does the word transformation really mean, and how do you really play that out in what you do?
For me, transformation is about the creation of something new, and that could be certainly in my own personal experience. It could be in an individual's personal experience. When you see something new for the first time, you have this experience of, transforming something. And then there's also, transformation in physical objects, the change of things, once was something and then it becomes something completely new. I mean, we often hear people say, oh my gosh, she got a new haircut and she completely transformed.
The physical transformation, yes.
That's right. That's absolutely right. The thing that I've noticed in particular, I think this is the connection for me with stories, is that when you listen to somebody tell a personal story, what happens is people see things that they've not necessarily seen before. They kind of saw something new in themselves that they hadn't quite seen before. And what happens is it gives them a new view. It gives them a new perspective, a new opening. And when they get a new opening and a new insight, that leads to actions that they hadn't seen before. So it really does have this connection between seeing something new and then making changes in your life in order to give yourself your own personal experience of transformation.
That's a great way to sum it up. And I know your business, The Performance Code, specialises in working with executives and leaders and entrepreneurs to create those breakthroughs in performance. Are we talking about a degree of physical transformation, given I know you're very fit and I've seen your gym routines on social media? Everyone look those up. But what else? I mean, what else are we talking about when we're looking at that breakthrough in their performance?
Look, it comes down to a couple of key things for me. It's a combination of making sure you got the right plans in place. So often when I talk to people about, well, what really is performance comes down to simply two things. It comes down to having the right strategic plan, knowing what it is you want to do, where you're heading and what your goals are. But most people end up focusing purely on those things, like the vision and the purpose and the goals and the action plan, and really great with coming up with the action plans and, and then communicating those plans with their staff and getting them all on board and everyone's really inspired, and except then they don't get the results that they want. So the second part that I mostly work in is the area of how to have people kind of produce the results that they're committed to. And it's not so much about the plan, it's about how do they deal with what gets in the way of them being able to impact that performance. What are the barriers that get in the way? What are the things, the obstacles? How do they be effective in the way they communicate with others in order to have the right outcome that they want? So performance ultimately then comes down to those two things. It's about, have you got the plan and the strategy in place, which is obviously all my corporate background, and then what are you doing to make sure that the people who you are expecting to impact performance are positively set up in a way that they can be effective? Like, are they set up for success? Is it an environment where they can communicate effectively? And are they set up where they're okay to experience failure and, those kind of things?
That's really interesting. So is there some examples of some of the common barriers that you've come up against, with multiple clients? Is there a bit of a theme to this sort of stuff that people are really grappling with in the modern workplace?
If I had to point out one theme, it would be communication, the breakdown that people experience in their effectiveness to communicate effectively. People are often, for example, in meetings where I even remember myself, my last role as the head of change and strategy planning at News Corp. And, I was in an executive meeting. There's about 10 to 12 of us in the meeting, and we were on a steering committee and we were accountable for the transformation and restructure of the business. And here I was, I was one of two women in the meeting, and we were about to get started in the meeting. And I noticed two individuals actually gossiping about one of the other colleagues that wasn't in the office. And wasn't attending that meeting at the time. And they were blaming him for why certain things in the project were not being achieved, like the results weren't getting produced. And I had this thought to myself, well, that's really inappropriate. The guy's not even here to actually respond to what you have to say, but what you've now just done is you've, in public, in front of the rest of the team, communicated that he's the one responsible for the breakdown. Now, of course, in there I am saying to myself this stuff, also not speaking up about what was happening. So, two things that were happening there. Firstly, people are not responsible for their communication in what they say and the impact that then has on the team's ability to impact their performance. And then secondly, people don't have the courage to speak up about certain things because of the fear of what might happen if they actually do speak up.
Absolutely. And I think I've had those experiences in my own career as well. And it doesn't just happen when you're younger. Like, you think, the older people would perhaps stand up, but do you find that it's not necessarily generational, or do you find the younger generation these days perhaps are a little bit more forthright in their communication style?
I think everybody's so different. I know plenty of younger people who, in fact, I have worked with some young entrepreneurs who are quite the opposite, so they don't necessarily speak that forthright. So I really do think it comes down to the individual. Talking about generations though, I've got 3 kids, right? So I can, they're pretty unleashed when it comes to saying what they need to say. But again, they say what they want to say without any knowledge about the impact it has on the people around them, right? I've seen
That's
my kids.
Right. The no filter thing that kids seem to get away with.
That's exactly right. I've got my kids will be sitting in a restaurant and there'll be some person who seems quite overweight and they will make a comment. They'll just stare at them and make a comment. That's called not responsible communication. At the same time, it's being straight, right? But as adults, we actually stop communicating all of the things that are in the hidden. So this is one of the key areas that I end up. There's usually the access to performance is being able to identify with people what is the thing that is unsaid. What are the conversations that you're having with yourself, about others, and about the environment that you're actually not willing to tell the truth about? Because it's actually that prevents us from being able to be effective in our performance.
Absolutely. So who do you predominantly work with? And is there a solid example you could share of maybe on a no-names basis helping a client into a transformation that they perhaps would call life-changing or a major breakthrough? So give us a really tangible example to discuss exactly how you operate.
Yeah, so there's actually two different ones I could give you, but the first one in different kind of dynamics. So the first one, which seems to be quite common, are business owners who have gone into, gone and set up their own business because they're an expert in something. So I've got one guy in particular who was an engineer, very effective in his job and was just so, swamped literally with the amount of work, but he saw an opportunity to go out and start his own business. And he'd been a couple of years in the business, but he was experiencing like working far too many hours, ineffective in having his business partner. So he got a business partner on board. He was experiencing his business partner not being effective in getting done what needed to get done when he expected it to get done.
Yes.
And so he called me and said, look, I want you to work with my business partner. Actually, he said, he's just not getting done what he needs to get done. And I said, okay. Now, me knowing that actually the individual, he was experiencing a breakdown performance, but I don't go, oh, well, let's go solve the problem called the person over there. Let's actually also take a look at why are you not experiencing being effective and having that partnership work. So I said to him, okay, well, rather than focus on let's making it the problem about your business partner, how about we look at the business and the state of the business and see what's happening that may be at the that may be causing that. So he's like, okay, great, do that. And so we started in that place, and this was probably where all of my change experience comes from too, looking at the actual condition of the environment. So I do take a look at the environment. I've seen many women, actually, this is the same case, you will work in an organisation and they will blame themselves for how they don't have what they want when inevitably they're in an environment that is toxic. So on my
Absolutely.
Yeah. So my first place is to always look at the total system. I look at the environment. I look at what's happening with the people in the environment. I look at the processes and the systems and then see what's actually in the background that could be causing that. But then what happened basically was we started having those conversations, and what was very evident to me the moment I was in the room together was I could see the way in which both of them were communicating with each other. Every time this particular guy I was working with who owned the business would communicate, the other guy wouldn't say a thing. And so I could see this dynamic where, he had a whole set of expectations that weren't being communicated. The other guy then just wouldn't speak up for himself. And so eventually, long story short, I worked with them both independently. I had one-on-one conversations with them so I could unpack what's going on for you, what's your opinion of how that went. So I'm really getting the unsaid. And then I did the same with his business partner. And clearly he was just not willing to speak up because he was afraid of that what he was saying was going to get shut down and it was going to be wrong and it was better not to say anything. So the end result was what's actually ended up happening is the guy who owns the business has now packed his stuff up and he's moved to Byron. He now works remote because he's actually got an incredible amount of trust for this guy that's running the business. The guy's doing what he needs to get done when he needs to get it done, and they're actually communicating in a way that gives him the freedom to step away from his business and be able to have the same level of performance. Now, I don't know about you, but he's about to have a baby in July, and for him, working 100 hours a week was just not practical. Not practical for his health, but it was also not practical for him as a parent.
Absolutely. We all know that experience, that both of us being parents, and you don't want to anymore anyway. I mean, those days if you have to do a 100-hour week, there's something I always think radically wrong with the way your workplace is set up or what systems you've got in place. So, I mean, that's a really powerful example of how I guess you've helped a business and people actually operate better. And it sounds like communication is once again the key in that.
Yes, very much so.
And was there a second example, or did you feel like that? Yeah.
So I'll give you a different dynamic. So a couple of there was two girls in particular, both entrepreneurs. So they had kind of something. So one of them is the founder of Mum Life Australia. She had a situation where she had a child, went back into the workforce, and, really struggled. Probably she said, she did say actually, it was because she had kids later in life. She felt like she really should have things handled and know what she's doing by the time it gets there, except she had no idea what she was doing. So she really struggled with the balance of, being a mum and her confidence and getting back into the workforce. And she noticed that as along her own journey, the things that helped her was, connecting with other people and then having available resources and information that helped her make some informed decisions. So she decided to follow this kind of pursuit, and started setting up Mum's Life Australia, and, great product and great deliverable as far as how it would help women to feel more confident about, becoming a new mum and balancing that with their jobs. Except she wasn't having the cut through that she wanted, so she had to keep working in her old job to pay for herself to be able to launch this thing. And as one knows, that's really not sustainable as a mother, let alone, anyone doing something like that. So the thing that we worked on was being able to identify for herself what was the any kind of barrier she had in particular about her ability to exit out of her current job and move into the next one. And it was a bit of a surprise, actually, because the thing that we had no idea what it was going to be, but she'd been invited on numerous occasions to speak publicly about what she was doing. And every time that happened, she'd kind of go into a bit of a shell. And she would, spend deliberating about whether she should and shouldn't do it and what am I going to say, and I'm not really clear about how to communicate and, what's the point, and kind of really struggled to get her message out there. So after having done the work around looking at what had been happening in her personal experience, and just honestly, it was really about going back and looking at what happened for her. She hadn't had somebody to be able to see and communicate in a way where she felt safe that she could say everything about her personal experience, the decisions that she made. Because I tell you now, most people do not like to admit that they have opinions about themselves and others that they don't really want to talk about. But when she did that, she got this incredible amount of clarity about how she could communicate in a way that would resonate with other women who had exactly the same experience. So I got this beautiful little letter from her actually about having gone and spoken at a particular event, and she said she'd never had so much power in being able to communicate her story with clarity. And she said the people that had come up to her afterwards and were sharing their story back with her, she said it just made, it was just a miracle for her.
Wow, that's powerful stuff. And personally, what sort of transformations have you gone through that have enabled you to become better at leading and activating this kind of change for greater good? Because I'm always a big believer that when you've experienced it yourself, you can definitely coach and mentor people, obviously with more clarity, because you understand, you have the empathy, you have the experience. Is there anything particularly for you that's helped you become a better practitioner at what you do?
Wow. So you should know I have multiple transformations every day. My day.
Not just your hair.
No, that's right. I have physical transformations, but I have a lot of mindset transformations to impact my performance, I tell you. But I suppose if I share the one that's most relevant to, the area of impacting performance and, the work I do with Team Women Australia especially, it was my own journey after having children. And this is kind of the bigger one, right? After having 3 kids, I went back. I was marketing director at News Corp at the time, and I loved my job. I had, great staff. We were doing big things, and but after I had my third child, so I had 3 children in under 3.5 years. And the third time, I was actually just desperate to get out of home and get back to work so I could have a nice warm cup of coffee, go to the bathroom in quiet, get me out.
Totally respect that.
That was authentically, that was really what was driving me. Did I really want to go back to work full time? No, I really didn't want to go back full time, but it wasn't like I also wanted to lose my job, right? So what happened was I remember the day so clearly, walking back into the office to have a conversation with my boss about coming back to work. And as I was walking through the corridor, I literally had this thought to myself, I just can't do this anymore. I cannot work full time with 3 kids. It's insane. And who am I thinking I am by trying to do that? Now, I didn't know this I wasn't present to it at the time, right? It's only now that when I got through that transformation work that I could see that was what held me back. So when I got into the meeting with him, I'm trying to have a conversation with him about, can I do my job in 3 days? And he's like, well, no, I need someone full time. And So I didn't say anything. I went, oh, well, I'm just grateful to have a goddamn job right now. And I didn't pursue it. I didn't push it. I didn't stand up for what I could do to make it work. I just backed right out. So what inevitably happened is I did end up coming up with a solution called, well, split my job. I'll take part of the strategy work, give somebody else, the marketing person who's now in the mat leave role, all the marketing stuff. And, I can manage that part-time. He said, oh, great solution. Now, of course, I did that, except I lost everything in that job that I loved. I was in an office working solo, no longer working on all of the leadership work, the business operation, the accountability, the forwarding of the business, blah, blah, blah. And so within about it was probably about 6 months actually, I was so bored. I was frustrated. I was resentful because my new office happened to be sitting outside of the boardroom where all the executives and me used to have our team meetings. And I would see them coming and going, and I would just get resentful. I'm like, this sucks, being politely saying. I had a bit more language behind how my real experience was.
Yes.
I was really, really stuck. And now what happened was I started to go into default mode, which is to do what I would normally do when I know to get a result, right? And which is, okay, get a coach, get a mentor, go back and study. Oh, yeah, go and do an MBA while you've got 3 kids and you're working part-time. That's really smart. Although at the time,
because you didn't have enough on your plate, clearly.
Clearly, right? But at the time, I didn't have this view called, let's really look at it from that perspective. I kind of just got into the mode called, let's just get shit done, right? So I went back and started studying. I'm like changing my career direction. I read this article called, some 50-year-old marketing guy was made redundant because they're bringing in all these new stuff. I'm like, great, marketing's not the next thing for me. So I went, okay, what's it going to be? When to change? So I literally started doing all of that work, and to the sun, look, I busted a gut to do it. I really did. But what happened was it wasn't until I was in this new change role, so it was about 12 months later because the company had restructured, and I got an email from our CEO at the time who sent out saying that one of my colleagues, the guy that I'd known, worked with for almost 15 years, had committed suicide. And I've never cried in the workplace, right, until that moment. And I stood up and I just lost it. It kind of really nailed me. And I thought, what the hell am I doing? This is not, I'm not okay with this. And, I had no idea the degree to which what he was dealing with. And it kind of started to put me into a different place about how I was looking at my own situation. But then what made it, I suppose, worse, if it could get much worse, was that it also happened to be the day of my son's 7th birthday. And so
goodness.
I went home that night, right, dealing with, you're not really going to start talking about the fact about how upset you are because it's your son's birthday. Just get over yourself. And so I walked in the door at home, celebrating cakes, and then I would sit down, have a glass of wine with my husband, and my husband starts crying. I'm like, what about me right now? This is my day, this is my friends, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, I just had to park it, right? Anyway, he turns around and says, so we're going to lose the business. So he's got a cabinet making business. So we're losing the business and we're going to lose the house. I was like, what?
Oh, wow. This is major. I wasn't quite expecting this, Kylee, when we started down this story.
Yeah, you can imagine what was occurring in my world, right? I mean, I was flippant from being incredibly angry and upset to being, annoyed at him. Like, how could you let it get to this? To then turning around, having my son sitting there celebrating his birthday, dealing with myself called, oh my God, you got a blah, blah, blah. And I tell you what, that for me, that period was a real challenge. And that for me was the moment where I actually did realize it doesn't matter how, what you want to do in life, what plans you've got. You can have all the grand plans in the goddamn world. Like here I had mapped out my entire next trajectory with my career and what I was going to do and how I was going to do it. And I tell you, unless you've got power in the face of those particular circumstances, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, because the only thing that ultimately really matters is our health and our relationships. And if we have no power in those 2 areas of life, we've got Buckley's chance of actually fulfilling on what we do want to contribute, when we do want to make a difference and we do want a great career and we do want to thank that. So that literally transformed my entire life, because I stopped making it about forwarding my objectives with my career, and I really actually know, well, the work that needs to be done here is how do we bring both of these things into the mix so that we can have, and I'm not saying have it all, like, because it really does take working on certain things at any particular time, but how does one, have power in the face of what we deal with in life so that we can impact the performance in areas of life that we do care about. And to be honest, I really do care about a career. I love working. I love making a difference. I love being a contributor. I can't
Totally.
I'm not interested in sitting at home doing washing and drop-offs at school. I mean, I love my kids, but that's not. So for me, that shifted my entire focus. I took actions that I'd never thought I'd ever take. I'd exited 23 years, I think I'd been in the corporate game. I never imagined that would be something that I would do, and I did it. I was willing to fail. I was willing to just get out there and actually focus on what really mattered. And it's not been an easy road, because I was used to having, the 6-digit income. I went from that to having nothing. I literally had to deal with myself about how I empowered my husband to become somebody to rebuild his business, which he's now done. I mean, I could go on, right? I think you get the nature of...
Absolutely. Now, that's an incredible story. And I guess touching on the other side of what you do with Team Women Australia, the idea of this powerful storytelling, which we did talk about a little bit in the beginning, and I love the idea that you want people to feel inspired, empowered, and I guess enabling more women to stand up for themselves like what you've had to do and live a courageous, compassionate and confident life. For you, why women, and how does that play out for you given your experiences?
Well, it was an accident to start with, right? So initially when I was dealing with this all of myself, I went back to work after that situation with my husband and, having a friend commit suicide and at the same time, I was struggling with my own return to work with what career I wanted. So I was going through a lot. What I noticed was when I started actually sharing openly with some of the other women at work, like they'd ask, you can have a cup of coffee and how are you going? And I actually would tell them. Whereas previously, mostly personal conversations like that were not something I'd be willing to talk about. So, this whole thing about what's personal versus professional, right? So I never would talk about that, but I did. I started talking about it and I started sharing with them about what my experience was really like. I started to share about how I was resentful about, not having the career that, I loved and blah, blah, blah. And every single woman said, oh, my God, that's actually what's happening for me. And I said, really? Because I had no idea, right? I'm like, we're talking about some of the senior executives at News Corp at the time. And I'm like, really? I said, I would never have thought. I said, you look like you've got it all handled. And I said,
the corporate armour that they keep on, which we all keep on at some point.
Yeah. And I was like, wow. And anyway, so I started telling them about what I was doing to get myself out of being stuck so that I could, do something else instead of tolerating the things that I didn't like. And they went, oh, well, what are you doing? And I went, as one does, I end up going and setting up a mentoring group in the company because, of course, the company doesn't provide any support or investment to, in fact, all the executives in there. No, even the senior executives weren't getting dollars to pay for executive coaching. So, redundancy time restructures, no money, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's BS.
Yeah. It really is, isn't it?
It really is. And look, nothing's changed in that area, by the way. Like even women I speak with now are, like I went to a 3% conference just recently in the creative industries of women trying to get tip the point over 3% of women in leadership. And I spoke to individuals, even those that are CEOs of those organisations, and even they were not getting money invested in coaching and empowering and that kind of stuff. So, but anyway, so what happened was I started mentoring some of them. I had 6, so there was about 6 of us, and I literally just started applying the same thing that I was doing with myself, looking at their values and looking at your strengths and then working out what you really want next and let's create a pathway and blah, blah, blah. And so we did all of that. And within 6 weeks, because of even some of the incremental results some of them were getting, we went from 6 to 55 in the space of about 6 weeks. And, because they would talk to their friends and then their friends were like, oh, my God, can I join? And so we had women from Qantas, from Kellogg's, from the real estate industry. I mean, you name it, it was kind of blended, right? And so that is what started it for me. That's how it happened. We ended up, there was a woman there who had this incredible story. I'm like, oh, my God, you've got to share that. And she says, oh, I want to do this speaking thing. But she said, but I've got no confidence. I'm sorry, you're ex-CMO of a FMCG company multinationally and you've got no confidence to stand up and speak. I was like, what's that about?
Said, the imposter syndrome that we also all relate to at some stage.
Yes, absolutely. But, she said, well, it's one thing to get up and talk about corporate budgets and blah, blah, blah. She said, but if I've got to share my personal story, I went, oh, God. I said, well, why don't we organise an event? And I said, you share your story. And I said, all we need to do is invite one other person each and we've got 100 in the room. So, of course, that's what we did and that's what happened. And that's kind of not looked back since then. So that's kind of how the female thing happened. I don't necessarily, so from a business perspective in coaching, as you can tell, like I work with men and women. I don't specifically, coach women. But so what I did was set, Team Women Australia up with the intention of having that support women. And the reason I did that was because we need a low-cost model that makes it accessible for women to get what they need. Because most of them who are struggling with this don't have the financial investment to pay anywhere from $150 up to $1,000 an hour for a coach. And they certainly don't have the money to go and invest in all these networking groups to attend to these different things, which, they've got to pay upwards of, $100, $200 just for membership. And then they've got to pay another $100, $200 to go on it. I mean, it just becomes too expensive. So that's why I set up Team Women Australia initially, and it just started to grow from there. And the more women who were getting inspired by seeing that they could be the ones that took action on the things that really mattered, the more that kind of grew. Now, if I was to look at evidence of why I think that's important, I don't know if you've watched it, but I would certainly recommend anyone watch the Michael Kimmel's TED Talk on why gender equality is good for everyone. And when I saw that, I just went, oh, my God. As a researcher, I'm like, yes, data finally from psychologists that tells us that empowering women is good for everybody.
And that's what sometimes people need. We've had Dr. Michael Kimmel was actually one of my early guests on this podcast, a gorgeous man, and I have so much time for him. But he definitely argues that case so well that even the skeptics, whoever they are, female, whatever, cannot dispute the evidence. And I think that's sometimes what we need in life to make things happen, although there's probably, even with that, so much more work to do. But I'd be curious to know, do you have any special mentors or inspirational people in particular that have guided you? They don't have to be well known, but, is there anyone that stands out for you, and what have they taught you about life?
Yeah. So there's a couple of women in my family who, of late have become very inspirational to me. I mean, once I kind of went through my own personal transformation and got complete for myself about my own upbringing, which was, not straightforward, let's say. So my mother became incredibly inspiring to me. She's the daughter of, stolen generation. So my grandmother was taken away from her mother at 3 years old, and so her upbringing was quite traumatic, and she had me when she was only 15, and I look back and I think, oh my God, oh jeez, I can't imagine myself at 15 years old having a child.
I know.
I was like, what although I spent most of my early adolescence and years really resenting her for not giving me the life that I think I deserved. But once I got complete about that, recognising that it was up to me to create my life, I just became incredibly, this was the turning point for me about compassion, actually, because I not only I had to forgive myself for the relationship I'd created with my mother, but I also then forgave, my mother, who also had certain things that happened, where there was a whole world of forgiveness that had to happen. So, I mean, she's just remarkable. I mean, at the time, she was obviously only 15, 16 in high school, and then she became a cosmetics lady behind a cosmetics counter, and and I pretty much most of my life had the opinion that, well, that's kind of all she became, and I wanted to become so much more than that, right? So I had to really confront my own belittlement of my mother, but when I did that, it just transformed everything. And she's now an academic. I can't believe sometimes I say this now, but she's an academic in one of the universities. Done PhD. She's now working with Indigenous, because I'm an Indigenous woman. She's now working with Indigenous communities to actually transform their experience in local communities to thrive. I mean, she's just bloody remarkable.
That's incredible. What a story. No wonder she's your inspiration. So just to wrap up, what is the best tip you have for the business-minded people out there, or anyone really who's trying to get ahead in the politics of transformation? What would be your final takeaway?
I would say well, two things, actually. Firstly, keep it real. and know that everyone is fighting a battle that we know nothing about, especially, if we're talking about in business. We have a tendency to focus on that which we can see externally, but it's often there's a world that occurs underneath what's happening from what we can see. So I think when we operate from compassion, so I'm a compassion activist, as you know, that has to start with oneself. So my best tip is do the work to have compassion for every single aspect of who you are in life, about, how you speak to yourself, how you speak to others, what you did and what you haven't done, even those things that you haven't done, that you wish you had done. Find compassion, because when you do, it really gives you power in having compassion for others. And when you do, that really expedites your ability to impact your performance in business.
I've so loved having you on The Politics of Everything. If you do want to connect further with Kylee Fitzpatrick, there will be some details on our show notes. Until next time, keep well. Thanks for listening today. If you've enjoyed The Politics of Everything, we thrive on feedback. So please add a short review and share the podcast with your network and your friends and family. I'm also always on the hunt for fabulous new guests. So if you've got a view to share and an idea how to get our listeners excited, please email me at amber@bespokecomms, that's BESPOKECOMMS.com.au, and we'll be sure to get back to you. Until next time.